I work to help build a 100% renewable energy system, and I do that. My firm belief is that we need people to be able to make good choices about their energy consumption and the way they use energy to build that kind of energy system. So I work for decentralized solutions with citizens, with communities, to better match supply from wind energy, from solar energy, which is not always constant, and match it with demand so that we move demand into those time slots as much as possible, where we have a lot of wind, a lot of solar, and lots of renewable energy supply, where we use that flexibility to build a resilient energy system, and at the same time empower people to make conscious decisions about their energy consumption, about how they use energy, and feel empowered to build that system with us. I think there's two ways we can make a difference to build a more inclusive energy system. One is really at the individual level, to empower people to understand the energy system and their role in it, and take active steps to become a part of this system. That's something which is not terribly complicated, but we've built a narrative around technical innovation that makes it sound very complicated, and climate change is a huge problem and energy transition is a huge issue, and lots of people, or it's very easy to feel discouraged. And I think it's really important to build courage and to say this is something that you can understand and you can absolutely be a part of. And it's not all about technological innovation, it is also very much about social innovations, the way we empower people to make decisions, to come together, say if I can't do this on my own, I might be able to do this in my community, I might be able to build small solutions together. So to really empower people to build these connections and work with communities to say, what does your infrastructure, or how should your infrastructure look like? What's important to you as a community, and how can the energy infrastructure serve those values and priorities? And that's a structural level change, to say energy infrastructure is part of our communities and it reflects our priorities and our values as much as it reflects technological innovation. And as far as inclusion goes, that's a story that very often has been told by men, and also in energy communities, also in citizen-based projects. I like to say we see lots of George Clooney, so lots of middle-aged men, over average education, over average income, and they're wonderful, obviously. Nobody dislikes George Clooney, but we also need the rest of the community to join in. And one of the things I think that's really important is to say you can be what you can see. So we need more women in that space, and we need those women to actively work towards including more women. So for the past 15 years, I've worked in the energy industry. I've gone from always being the only woman in the room to us being 15 to 25%, which is much better. But in the community space, I think there's a real chance for more inclusion because we emphasize values and community priorities. And lots of women feel much more drawn to this kind of value-oriented infrastructure planning. If we say it's not all about the perfect tech solution, it's about what matters to your community and how do we create a resilient infrastructure. I have had the tremendous fortune to meet with community energy leaders in Germany, in Great Britain, in Scandinavia, in Spain, in lots of different European countries, and I'm sure beyond Europe there's also so many people who inspire me, because those that I met really go about looking at their immediate surroundings and saying, what can I change immediately here, and how can that be something that grows and builds on itself as we go along. And I think that's really something that I keep coming back to, this idea of saying, don't think something is too big, don't think it's too ambitious, just think about the next step. What's the next step if we want to go in that direction? And then sometimes you look back and you can't imagine that you made it this far, but it's not because I think you kept thinking about this key target. It's always thinking about the next step and the next step. And that's really something that I learned from community leaders. And it's also, I think, something that I especially learned from women in the community energy space, to believe in this connection between tech and social innovation, because I think that's something, when I started working in this field, people were looking at me very weirdly when I said, well, energy infrastructure is part of our everyday lives. It's obviously connected to what we value and what we think is important. And that's not a very popular opinion, especially in Germany. We like to think of ourselves as engineers, and we like to think about technological solutions to all of our problems. And there were a couple of community energy leaders, especially women, who said, well, of course that's true. Of course that's the way we should go. And of course that's the story that we need to amplify and tell many more people, so that they feel that they can change something for the better in their own communities. There's two kind of things that I do. One is a lot of my voluntary work, which focuses on community energy projects. And what I do when I work with those projects is really to focus on the resources that they have that very often they're not aware of, shared stories they might have, or particular conditions that they might have, and they might not know how much potential there is already. So I really work with them to say, this is what you already have, and we can build on that, and we can grow that. And very often the message here is, oh, I didn't even know that was an asset. And that, I think, makes a really big difference, because they then work with those assets and they feel much more resourceful than they were before. And I really think that's an important feeling to have if you're working on a big problem, to say, I already have a lot going on for me and my community. And then with my company that I co-founded with a couple of colleagues and friends, what we work on is really this combination of social and technical innovation, to say, if we have a digital innovation that makes it easier to match fluctuating supply and demand, and that makes it easier to connect that through a tariff, through pricing signals, to say, well, if we have a price that tells us now you should be using energy, and now you maybe should be trying to not use energy because we're working with a fluctuating supply from wind and solar, that needs to be a lot easier, and it needs to be a lot cheaper and more accessible. So that's why we are building a digital platform, to make it cheaper and more accessible. But we are connecting it to a story of tariff and choices, to make sure that the energy industry understands the people in the end will make all the difference. If I can't buy a device and choose a smart tariff for my electric heater, for my electric car, then we won't be able to access that storage, and we won't be able to build the energy system that we need to build for a renewable future.